Hi, I'm Pete Sharman, a Product Manager with the Enterprise Manager team. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to create a test master database with a continuous data flow using a DataGuard standby database. When you are deploying a test master database, there are two ways of refreshing the data between the source and the test master database. Firstly, you can have what we call continuous replication, where data refresh takes place automatically and instantaneously using technology such as Oracle DataGuard. Masking and subsetting is not possible when using continuous replication, as it relies on shipping of redo records immediately they are written to the source database. Alternatively, you can have discrete replication, where data is refreshed manually or at scheduled intervals using technologies such as Oracle's Recovery Manager product. When using discrete replication, masking can take place at the test master database. In this screenwatch, I'll show you how private SnapClone instances can keep their data in sync with production using a continuously replicated test master database. Firstly, I need to select the database to be cloned from the database homepage. In this case, I'm using one called prod1. Let's have a look at this database. You can see prod1 is an 11204 database, and in this particular case, because it's a production database, it has a DataGuard instance associated with it for protection. We can verify that by looking at the DataGuard administration page, where you can see the prod1 STB standby database is associated with prod1. We can also look at how well the DataGuard performance is running by viewing the DataGuard performance page. This particular standby is not a simple standby in the sense that the files for this standby reside on a registered filer. So let's confirm that by viewing the storage registration page. Here you can see our NetApp filer, and if I click on that, you can see down here we have the prod1 STB database, and I can show the files that make up that database, all residing on a NetApp filer. Since the standby resides on a NetApp filer, I can create a thin clone from it. For now, I'm just going into the database cloud and drill in to look at test master databases. Now I can add the prod1 STB as a test master simply by clicking the Add button and selecting it from the list. As you can see, Enterprise Manager has automatically determined that prod1 STB is a standby database associated with the prod1 database, and it's of type live data. The next step in this process is to create various snapshots from this particular standby. To do this, I start the wizard by clicking on the Create button. The first thing I need to do is select the reference target, so I click on the magnifying glass and select the prod1 STB database. Next, I need to tell the wizard to create storage snapshots. And I need to provide some credentials. I don't want to change any of the profile information other than the profile name, so let me change that. But I want to set the schedule to run every day. I'm going to set the snapshots to end in a few days just to save on a bit of space. And I'll set the purge policy to purge after 5 snapshots. I get the chance to review the information I provided, and once I've submitted, I'm taken to the procedure activity page. Here I like to do a view, expand all, and set the refresh to every 30 seconds so that I don't actually have to refresh the page manually. It's going to take some time to complete this procedure, so I'm going to pause the video recording here and come back to it. I've created a single snapshot, so now to expose that for the self-service user, I need to create a service catalog entry. To do that, I'm going to the Database Cloud Setup page and start the Service Templates wizard. First, I need to give this template a meaningful name. And I want to base this off a profile I'd already created, so I'll select that. And I'll allow the user to select the profile version they want to use. I can also specify a SID prefix here if I want to, or allow the user to specify the SID themselves when they create it. In my case, I think it's useful to be able to easily identify these databases as being based off the CRM database, so I'll enter CRM for the SID prefix. Since the service template can be configured to provision databases in more than one pool, I need to add the zone. And then assign the pool. On the next step of the wizard, I need to provide the mount point prefix and the amount of storage. I'm going to allow the user to take 5 snapshots. And I need to tell it the port number for the relevant listener. I also need to provide some passwords. On the next step, you can see something brand new we've added here. You can set database sizes that you want the service template to support now, small, medium, and large. I'm going to select all 3 and set small as the default. I could also change initialization parameters here, but I'll leave those alone for now. Now I can specify some custom scripts which can be run before and after the service instance is created or deleted. I don't want to do that right now, but I will set the lifecycle status to production. And set it to be required. I'm going to allow self-service users with the developer role to use this template, so I'm going to add that here. Finally, I can review all the settings I've chosen and then create the service template. I've come back to the data sources page after 5 days, and you can see we now have a snapshot for each day. So that's the self-service admin part. Now I want to log in as a self-service user and show you what they can do. So I'm going to log out as John Smith and log back in again as Jane Doe. You can see when I do that Jane has her preferences set to automatically go to the database self-service portal. The self-service portal part comes automatically from her privilege as a self-service user, but she's chosen the database self-service portal up here under Preferences. Now the first thing I'm going to do here as Jane is request a database. So I'm going to request a new service, and in this case I'll choose a thin clone of CRM application. I'm going to give this request a name. I'll leave the zone as it is and set the service to something more recognizable. This service is what you'll need to provide to the users of the database so they can connect to it. Notice that here it's picked up the default database size of small that I said earlier, but I can change that if I like. For now I'll leave that as it is. Notice I can set both the start date, which defaults to now, and a duration after which the database will be automatically destroyed. That's very useful for things like proofs of concept that might be very short-lived. I need to provide an administrative username and password that I'm going to use to administer the database. I can also specify some instance properties for the service, such as a contact name and line of business. In this case, the self-service admin has predefined a value for lifecycle status, which is mandatory, but I could overwrite that if I want with a different lifecycle status. I'm going to leave the instance properties as is. On the right-hand side, I can specify which snapshots I want to use to create this database from. I'm going to choose this one. Back on the database self-service portal, there are now 2 requests added for me, one to create the database and one to delete it, because I set it to delete after a few days. I can watch this progress here, or I can click into the detail by clicking the request name. I'm going to set the refresh period to every 30 seconds, so I can see things progressing. It takes a few minutes for the databases to build depending on the performance of your relevant hosts and so on, so let's skip over that to see what the result is. We can see now that the request is completed and my new service is now listed, so I'm going to drill into that. There are a couple of things to take note of here. Firstly, you can see a refresh button. This is used to refresh this thing cloned from the test master database. Secondly, in the summary region, you can see the full connect string. This is what you'll need to provide to the users of the database so they can connect to it. Thirdly, I can see roughly how much storage I've used in the storage utilization region. And at the moment, you'll see there's not a lot used because this is sitting on copy on write technology and I haven't made any changes to the database. I can also see the last synchronization date of February 1st, 2015. Finally, I can create more snapshots off this version by clicking the Create link in the Snapshot and Restore region. So let's do that. I need to provide it with a name. And the snapshot creation request has been submitted. You can see now I have a private snapshot of my database. I can create as many of these as I want, so I'll create a couple more as well. While the snapshot is being built in the background, you'll see a status for the snapshot of incomplete. Let's say this database is being used by developers for testing new code. Once that status of incomplete clears, the snapshot is ready, and I could now make database changes to my original database, such as adding new tables or columns, and test out the changes. I can then use this second snapshot I've just taken to restore the database as it was before the database changes had been made by clicking the Restore button. Once I've told the system to restore to the second snapshot, I can go back to the self-service portal and watch the progress of the restore. Now let's go back to the database homepage. I can see the database has been restored because snapshot 03 that I'd taken more recently than snapshot 02 has now gone. So what happens when a database has been created using a snapshot that then expires? Does it automatically get deleted when the snapshot expires? Let's log back in as John Smith and see what happens in that situation. Here I can see that the snapshot was due to expire 6 days ago. However, it can't be removed automatically because Jane still has a database using that snapshot. I can see who owns that database by looking at this link in the Used By column. And indeed it shows me that Jane Doe owns this particular database. I can now call Jane and tell her she needs to refresh her database because the data is quite old. Let's swap back to Jane's view of the Database Cloud Self-Service portal. where I can refresh that database. When I select the service name, it takes me back to the database home page for that service. From here, it's simply a matter of clicking the refresh button, selecting a more recent snapshot, and clicking refresh again. I get prompted to make sure I want to refresh the database to the snapshot I selected. And notice again that the private snapshots I had created will be purged. I then see the refresh database request has been submitted successfully, and I can go back to the database cloud self-service portal to watch the progress of the refresh. Once the refresh is completed, you'll see the synchronized on time has been updated to reflect the time of the refresh. I'm Pete Sharman. Thanks so much for watching.